right, ladies and gentlemen, the moment has just about arrived. We are here to welcome you. We'll introduce ourselves, and then all the distinguished faith leaders will come in. So, I am Christiana Manpour. I'm CNN's chief international correspondent, and as such, I have covered the world, including many of the issues, obviously, that we're discussing today. In fact, I'm very proud that since 2011, CNN has had its own Freedom Project, where we take on and put the heft of our network behind the effort to eradicate modern slavery. We do it on television, we do it online, and we do it across all platforms. So it's a great privilege for me to be here and be part of this event today.
Eminencias, excelencias, autoridades, colegas de las comunicaciones, telespectadores y radioescuchas. Buenos días a todos. Soy el padre Federico Lombardi, director de la Oficina de Prensa Vaticana. Os doy la bienvenida en nombre de los organizadores de este gran encuentro. El Centro Televisivo Vaticano y Radio Vaticano producen las imágenes y el sonido de este acontecimiento, ofrecidos a todas las televisiones y radios del mundo que estén interesadas a retransmitir. El Papa Francisco nos dio un gran impulso por estar todos juntos en la lucha contra las nuevas esclavitudes. Y hoy, en esta Academia de las Ciencias, tenemos el honor de estar con él y con grandes líderes de las religiones del mundo para declarar nuestro compromiso común en esta lucha. Estoy particularmente honrado por acompañarlos a todos ustedes en los diversos momentos de este acto solemne con algunas palabras de información y comentario en lengua española.
So we say buenos dias, buongiorno, hello, good day, and salam to everybody who is here. The religious leaders are arriving now and gathering, and I'm going to give you a couple of protocol instructions. Everybody, please sit down throughout the presentation. Please, everybody, put your mobile phones on silent. And of course, you can take pictures, but no flash photography. So no flash. Now, I think Father Lombardi and everybody here will agree that we're hoping for a true miracle to end slavery in our modern world, but today we're also hoping for a slightly more mundane miracle, that the translation work properly. We have slight technical issues right now. The translation is not working as well as it should do, or at all. It was, and hopefully it'll come back at some point during the event.
Yes. As Christiane said, tengo que informar.
I simply would like to inform all those here that simultaneous translation is not being broadcast. We do hope that it will be working as soon as possible.
Be given the signal when the religious leaders are, and the Holy Father Pope Francis is ready to come in, and when they do, we will start. I heard something there. I heard some translation. Maybe.
Yes.
No? All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind standing up as the religious leaders arrive and take their seats. Okay. They're not sitting. They're not sitting. Okay. Your Holiness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today leaders of the world's religions have come together to form a historic initiative to eradicate modern slavery. And please, ladies and gentlemen in the audience and all participants, please do sit down, as I am honored to welcome Pope Francis, Her Holiness Mata Amritanandamayi, the Venerable Bhikkhu Niktik Chankong, who's representing Thich Nhat Hanh, Rabbi Dr. Abraham Sorka, Dr. Abbas Abdullah Abbas Shoman, representing Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Grand Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi al-Modarresi, His Eminence, the Metropolitan Emmanuel of France, representing His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, Sheikh Nazir Razak Jafar, who's representing the Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Bashir Hussein al-Najafi, the Most Venerable Datuk K. Sri Damatrana, the Chief High Priest of Malaysia, Sheikh Omar Aboud, Chief Rabbi Dr. David Rosen, the Most Reverend and Right Honourable Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Andrew Forrest. This is, in fact, the first time in history that leaders of the Christian, Catholic, Anglican, and Orthodox, as well as Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, and Muslim religions, come together to jointly declare one common endeavor against slavery. The religious leaders will sign a declaration to underline their joint commitment to inspiring spiritual and practical action by all world religions and people of goodwill everywhere to eradicate the scourge of modern slavery.
Hoy los líderes religiosos firmarán una declaración.
Today, the religious leaders will sign a declaration to eradicate modern-day slavery with the aim of underlining their joint commitment with the inspiring spiritual actions and practices of all of the religions and all men and women of goodwill throughout the world.
Now, before we have the privilege to listen to the honorable group that's gathered here, we'd like to say a few words about the issue of modern slavery and about the organization that stands behind this event, and that is the Global Freedom Network.
La esclavitud moderna es un tema que afecta a todos los países.
Modern-day slavery is a theme that is important in all countries and for all religions in the world, without exception. Modern slavery is the systematic deprivation of the freedom of a person or abuse and mutilation of the body of a human being for the purposes of commercial or private exploitation. According to the most recent data, approximately 36 million people throughout the world are currently caught in the networks of modern-day slavery. The Global Freedom Network is uniting many different creeds with the vision and the aim of eradicating modern-day slavery and trafficking in human beings. In this agreement, all of the parties commit themselves to take unprecedented steps to promote global actions to eradicate this form of slavery.
Your Holiness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we now have the great privilege to be witness to the statements of the distinguished group that's gathered here today.
Ahora tendremos el gran privilegio de ser
Today we will have the
testigos
great privilege
de
of
las
being the
declaraciones
witnesses
del
of the
distinguido
statements
grupo
of the
que se ha
distinguished
reunido hoy
group that
aquí.
has assembled here today.
So, Holy Father, you played a key role in establishing the Global Freedom Network. You were the first person to call modern slavery and human trafficking a crime against humanity. As you appeal for this scourge to be eradicated once and for all, tell us what exactly motivated your passion about this particular scourge.
Su Santidad, usted ha jugado un papel clave en establecer la Global Freedom Network.
Your Holiness, you played a key role in establishing the Global Free Network. You were the first person to qualify modern-day slavery and trafficking of human persons as a crime against humanity. Now we are honored to hear your appeal for the eradication of slavery once and for all.
Su Santidad, a usted la palabra.
Your Holiness.
Señoras, señores,
Ladies and gentlemen,
agradezco a todos los líderes
I am very
religiosos
grateful
aquí
to
reunidos
all of the religious leaders who have assembled here today
en favor
for their
de los
commitment
sobrevivientes
in
de
favor
la
of the
trata de
survivors of the
personas, y a
trafficking of
todos
human
los
beings.
presentes por su intensa
And I'm grateful to
participación
all
en
here
este acto de
for their
fraternidad,
participation in this,
especialmente
which
para
is
con
an
los más
act of
sufridos de
fraternity,
nuestros hermanos.
fraternity in particular with
Inspirados
our brothers and sisters who
por
suffer the
nuestras
most.
confesiones
We
de
are
fe,
inspired by
hoy
our
nos hemos reunido
faiths,
con motivo
and we
de
have
una
joined together
iniciativa
here
histórica
for this historic
y de una
initiative,
acción concreta.
and also for very
Declarar
practical action. We wish
que
to
trabajaremos
declare that we
juntos
will work together
para erradicar
to
el
eradicate
terrible flagelo
the
de la
terrible
esclavitud moderna
scourge of modern
todas sus formas.
slavery in all its forms.
La explotación física,
Physical,
económica,
economic,
sexual,
sexual,
psicológica
and psychological
de hombres,
exploitation
mujeres y
of
niños,
men,
y
women,
niñas, actualmente
boys, and girls,
encadena a decenas
today
de
is
millones de
holding
personas
tens of millions
a
of
la
people in
deshumanización y a la
chains
humillación.
and is leading to their dehumanization and
Cada ser
humiliation.
humano,
Every human
hombre,
being,
mujer, niño o
man,
niña,
woman,
es imagen
girl,
de Dios.
boy, is in the image of
Dios
God,
es amor y
God is
libertad
love,
que se
God
dona
is
en relaciones
freedom,
interpersonales.
who gives himself
Así,
in
cada ser
interpersonal
humano es una
relations,
persona
and every
libre,
human being
destinada a
is
existir
born
para
to
el
be
bien de
free
otros
and exists for the
en
good of
igualdad
others
y
in
fraternidad.
conditions of equality and fraternity.
Cada una y todas las personas
Each
son
and every
iguales
person is equal,
y se les debe reconocer
and
la
this
misma libertad
freedom, the same freedom and the same dignity must be recognized to all. Any form of discrimination that does not respect the fundamental condition that the other person is as ourselves is a crime, and very often an aberrant form of crime. And that is why we, on behalf of each and every one of our faiths, we declare that modern slavery and the trafficking of human beings, forced labor, prostitution, and exploitation of human organs constitute a crime against humanity. The victims come from all different conditions. Most often, the victims, however, are to be found among the poorest and most vulnerable of our brothers and sisters. On their behalf, our communities of faith are being called to action, and without exception, we reject any form of systematic deprivation of human freedom for the purposes of personal or commercial exploitation. And on their behalf, we are making this declaration. Despite the great efforts already made by many, modern slavery continues to be a horrendous scourge which is present on great scale throughout the world, even in forms of exploitation for tourism. This crime against humanity is disguised behind often practices and customs that are accepted, but the victims are to be found in prostitution, in human trafficking and forced labor, bonded labor and conditions of slavery, mutilation and sale of human organs, abuse of drugs, and child labor. It hides behind closed doors in the homes of individuals or on the streets, in cars, in factories, in the fields, on small fishing boats, and in many, many other places as well. It happens in cities, it happens in villages. We find it in the richest of countries and in the poorest countries in the world. And the worst thing is that this situation, unfortunately, is growing worse day by day. We therefore call all men and women of faith and their leaders and the governments and businesses and all men and women of goodwill, we call them to action, that they lend their steadfast support and join this movement against modern slavery in all its forms, sustained by the beliefs of our faith and our shared human values. We can all and we must together raise the standard of spiritual values and make this joint effort to eradicate slavery from our planet. I ask the Lord to give us today the grace of converting ourselves into the neighbor of each and every person, without exceptions, and to offer them the active support they need whenever they cross our path, whether it be an elderly person abandoned by all, a worker being mistreated, a refugee caught up by organized crime, a young man or woman walking down the streets of our world who's a victim of sexual exploitation, a person who is caught in prostitution through deception, a child mutilated whose organs have been harvested. Every time he will let us remember the words of our Lord, whatever they did to one of these, the smallest they did to me. So I thank you all for being here today, for having convened here and undertaken this commitment that we all share, a commitment that engages us all. We all are created in the image and likeness of God, and we all firmly believe that we cannot tolerate that the image of the living God be subject to this most abominable form of trafficking. Thank you.
Gracias, Santo Padre. And now next, Your Holiness, Mater Amritan Daimiai, you are known for your great support of charitable causes. The Global Freedom Network welcomes your support and practical action to eradicate modern slavery once and for all. So please share with us your appeal to eradicate modern slavery.
ആത്മസ്വരൂപങ്ങളായിരിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. ആദരണീയായ പോപ്പ് ഫ്രാൻസിസും മറ്റ് വിശിഷ്ടാതിഥികളെ ആദ്യമായി
for participating in such a historic gathering. I take this opportunity to offer my gratitude for the determination and social commitment of His Holiness, and to Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, respected Bishop Marcelo Sanchez Sorondo, who has worked very hard to make this assembly a reality. Human trafficking is one of the worst curses that plague society, not only for this century, but since the beginning of time. The more we try to eradicate slavery and forced labor, it seems to rebound with doubled strength, like an evil ghost that keeps haunting us. As His Holiness has stated, human trafficking is an open wound on the body body of contemporary society. It is a crime against humanity. It is a duty of each country to implement laws that work towards eradicating this extremely cruel and immoral crime and to liberate and protect victims from such a fate. It is also the moral responsibility of every citizen who is committed to justice and social welfare. We're all aware of the bitter truth that this problem cannot easily be solved, for the wound of human trafficking is centuries old and extremely deep-rooted. We've been granted the blessing of life through God's compassion, so this life should be spent performing good deeds as an offering. To destroy another person's life is a misuse of God's gift. All living beings are instruments in the hands of the divine. The law of God's court is righteousness, or dharma. Let us all strive to respect and follow this law. Human trafficking is unrighteous. All religious leaders have the ability to help both the perpetrators, who trap their fellow human beings in the net of enslavement, as well as the victims who get caught in this net. They both need to be guided to the right path. We should be prepared to fight a battle to uphold righteousness. This is not a war meant to kill, but to save the helpless from the grip of demonic minds. We don't want a response born out of revenge due to perceived differences. We need to develop empathy, realizing the divinity within everyone. Our mind has created many divisions in the form of religion, caste, language, and national boundaries. Let us try to create a bridge of all-encompassing pure love to break down these self-created walls. Any hardened heart will soften in love. Love can spread light through even the densest darkness. Selfless love transforms the mind from a demon that enslaves us into our own liberator. Those who traffic and enslave others fall prey to a negative mind. Religious leaders should, without ulterior motives, formulate an action plan of rehabilitation based on selfless love and spirituality, the essence of all faiths. Remaining silent in the face of unrighteousness is unrighteous. Governments and political leaders have to establish laws without loopholes so the guilty can't escape. In many countries, the government and NGOs are fighting against trafficking, but we see no reduction in the power and massive financial gain of those who make a business out of treating living beings as mere objects to be used and eventually discarded. The number of victims is rapidly increasing. Like the roots of an enormous tree, the roots of this tragedy are pervading deeper into society. If we fail to do something effective against this injustice happening right in front of our eyes, it will constitute a travesty against future generations. Victims of human trafficking lose their self-respect and fall into a pit of despair. They're often used by terrorists as drug mules, suicide bombers, and other illegal activities. Some foods we eat daily are produced by children who are first forced to work day and night. Victims' kidneys and other body parts become commodities sold in the marketplace. When these victims are no longer useful and have developed psychological problems as a result of abuse or contract incurable diseases such as AIDS, they are finally thrown out onto the streets. I've personally seen and listened to thousands upon thousands of examples of human trafficking. Once a woman came to me and burst into tears. She said, "Amma, I have AIDS. My only desire is to see my child before I die. Please help me. When I was 9 years old, I worked as a domestic servant for a family. There I met an elderly man. He promised a better salary and various other benefits. Because my family had financial problems, I left with him. When we reached the new place, I saw there were many other girls there, but I wasn't allowed to speak to them. Finally, I realized it was a brothel, and men started to rape me regularly. At first, I felt angry as well as guilty for what I was being made to do, but as time went by, I lost all sense of dignity and even started to find pleasure in my work. After 5 years, I gave birth to a baby girl. They let me breastfeed for the first month, then suddenly took her away. After a few years, I was diagnosed with HIV. They didn't allow me to see my child. When I became really sick, they promised to take me to a hospital, but instead, they abandoned me. I begged to see my child just one more time, but they never agreed. They didn't even take me back to the brothel. Everyone I approached for help treated me with disgust and loathing. The only thing they didn't do is throw stones at me. All doors close in my face. I cannot live in this world anymore. I just want to see my child once more before I die. Will they inject her with hormones to make her look older, use her like they used me, and eventually throw her out? Hearing her pathetic story, I sent some people to try to find her daughter. It was a difficult task. Other women narrated their horrifying story to Amma. A man used to visit us regularly. He would help with whatever was needed, and we became very comfortable with him. After a while, he offered to take our children abroad to work in his friend's company, promising to send us large amounts of money each month. He gave each of us an advance payment of 1,000 rupees, taking our children with him. We've not seen him or our children since. We're not sure where our children are, but heard they were taken to a brothel. When people went to search the brothel, they were told that the children had already been trafficked. Saying this, they burst into tears. Today, the value of everything has increased. Men sell their sperm and women their ova for a great deal of money. But ironically, a child can be purchased for prostitution or forced labor for a pathetic sum of $10 to $20. In spite of taking regular medication, if a diabetic continues to eat sweet food, their blood sugar level will increase. So diet control and lifestyle modification are more important than medication. Impoverished children who lack access to proper education because schools are scarce often only go to 4th or 8th grade. We need to provide the new generation, as well as victims of human trafficking, with a practical education to help create a greater awareness within them. We need to awaken their latent courage and self-confidence to help them arise. They need to realize they are not helpless and vulnerable like kittens. They are mighty and courageous lions. We have to help them elevate their minds. There are two types of education: education for a living and education for life. When we study in college striving to become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, this is education for a living. On the other hand, education for life requires an understanding of the essential principles of spirituality. The main purpose of education should be to impart a culture of the heart, a culture based on enduring values. When Amma's devotees go to villages to give vocational training, women are also given life enrichment and sex education classes. As a result, many young women have been able to save themselves from people trying to sell them for prostitution, sometimes even their own parents. Amma has been able to help 80% of the women who were forced into prostitution and came to her for help. The other 20% are continuing the same way of life. They don't want to change, and Amma has not tried to force them. Lust is a kind of hunger. Even if we feel hungry, we don't devour everything we can get our hands on. If we go to a restaurant and see what others have ordered, we may think, I wish I'd ordered that dish instead. But even if we feel this way, we exercise a certain amount of restraint. In this manner, we need to exercise restraint for everything in life, especially lust. Spiritual values need to be inculcated at a young age. When Amma was a child, her mother would say, never urinate in the river. The river is the Divine Mother. When we swam in the backwaters, even though the water was cold, remembering our mother's words, we could restrain ourselves. When we develop a reverential attitude towards a river, we will never defile it. Our respect towards the river helps to keep it clean, and a clean river ultimately benefits everyone who uses it. It's not important to debate whether God exists or not. What is important is that devotion and faith in God help to sustain good values and righteousness in society. These values are what bring balance to society and the entire creation. Roads are meant for vehicles to drive on, but if we say, I can drive however I wish, we might get into an accident. Just as there are traffic rules, there are similar rules for everything in life. Spiritual values help us to live according to these rules. A lot of people are working hard to put a stop to child labor, but just by banning it, we won't be able to solve the problem. Once a man brought a 10-year-old boy to Amma. He wanted Amma to raise the boy in the ashram and told the story of how he became an orphan. His father had died 2 years before, so his mother and sister went to work in a matchbox factory near their home. His mother was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease and was bedridden, unable to work. His sister was paid very little, but just enough to make ends meet. After a while, laws were established that banned child labor. The owner of the factory was arrested and his company shut down. All the children working there were let go. Distraught at the loss of their only source of income, the mother sent her son to school in the morning. Then she poisoned her daughter and herself. It is justifiable to shut down such factories, but we often forget the families of young children who depend on these factories in order to live. Before we push drastically to stop child labor and human trafficking, first we need to build a foundation to help these families become self-sufficient and ensure their future. Spirituality begins and culminates in compassion. If we could transform compassion from a mere word into a path of action, we would be able to solve 90% of the world's humanitarian problems. There are two types of poverty in the world. The first is due to lack of food, clothing, and shelter. The second is the poverty of love and compassion. We need to tackle the second type of poverty first. If we have love and compassion, we will wholeheartedly serve and help those who lack basic needs. According to the Bhagavad Gita, the creator and creation are one, just as waves in the ocean are one and the same. Though we can see 1,000 suns reflected in 1,000 pots of water, there's only one sun. Likewise, the consciousness within all of us is the same. Just as our hand spontaneously reaches out to soothe the other hand when in pain, may we all console and support others as we would ourselves. People from all nations and religions become victims to the ravaging effects of human enslavement and experience extreme abuse and suffering. Their physical and mental pain doesn't differentiate between language, race, or skin color. These victims are just a single group of humans struggling against the clutches of endless sorrow and emotional suppression. There are several antibiotic ointments to help to heal external wounds, but there's only one medicine that can heal the wounds of our mind. This medicine is pure love. In order to heal the mental and emotional wounds inflicted upon the victims of human trafficking, we need to care for them with selfless love. This will bring them into the light of a free life, away from the darkness forcefully imposed upon them in the past. Only religious and spiritual leaders can bring together a task force of social servants to carry out this sacred mission. May the inherent compassion within all living beings awaken. May we all develop the discernment to love and respect life and those living around us. We are not isolated islands, but interconnected links on the chain of God's creation. May we realize this great truth. May we forget all the pain and suffering of the past and forgive all the hurt we have experienced. May we bow down in reverence to all that is good in the world and find eternal happiness.
നന്മയുടെ മുമ്പിൽ കൃതജ്ഞതാപൂർവ്വം നമസ്കരിക്കാനും അവർക്ക് കഴിയട്ടെ. ഇതിന് സാധാരണ പറയുന്നത് അനേക തലങ്ങളിലുള്ള ഒരു ഉപാധികൾ, അനേക തലമുള്ള ഒരു പ്രവർത്തനമാണെന്ന് പറയും. അതിന് പരിഹാരം അനേക തലത്തിൽ കൊണ്ടുവന്നാലേ സാധിക്കുള്ളൂ. ധാർമ്മിക വശമുണ്ട്, സാമ്പത്തിക വശമുണ്ട്, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ നിയമപരമായ വശമുണ്ട്, നിഷ്കാമ സേവനത്തിനെയും ബോധവൽക്കരണത്തിലെയും തലമുണ്ട്. എല്ലാ രീതിയിലുള്ള സമഗ്രമായ ഒരു പ്രയത്നത്തിലൂടെ മാത്രമേ ഇതിന് കുറച്ചെങ്കിലും ഒരു പ്രവൃത്തിത്വം കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ, എല്ലാവരെയും സമഗ്ര പ്രവൃത്തി കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ നമുക്ക് സാധിക്കുകയുള്ളൂ. അതിന് എല്ലാവർക്കും കഴിയട്ടെ, അതിന് ശക്തി ഉണ്ടാകട്ടെ എന്ന് പരമാത്മാവിനോട് തന്നെ പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കുകയാണ്.
Thank you very much indeed. And now the Venerable Bhikkhuni Thich Chan Kong, who is very kindly going to be representing Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master, who once said that upeksha, or freedom, is one of the 4 aspects of love. We understand that the Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, wanted very much to be part of this declaration, but is unable to be here because of health reasons. So please share with us his appeal against slavery.
Our beloved and venerable Pope Francis, Your Holinesses, Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, most venerable, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to read the words that our beloved teacher Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh wishes to deliver here today. We are grateful to gather today to announce to the world our commitment to work together to end modern slavery and to plead to those who traffic in human beings to stop the exploitation and to ask world leaders and organizations to protect the dignity of these young women, men, and children. They are our daughter, our son, our sister, our brother. It is clear that in this age of globalization, what happened to one of us happens to all of us. We are all interconnected and we are all co-responsible. But even with the greatest goodwill, if we are swept away by our daily concern for material needs and emotional comforts, we'll be too busy to realize our common aspiration. Contemplation must go together with action. Without a spiritual practice, we will abandon our dream very soon. Each of us, according to the teaching of our own tradition, should practice to touch deeply the wonders of nature, the wonders of life in each of us, the kingdom of God in each of us, the pure land, nirvana in each of us, so we can get the healing and nourishment, the joy and happiness born from the insight that the kingdom of God is already available in the here and now. The feeling of love and admiration for nature that we all share has the power to nourish us, unite us, and remove all separation and discrimination. By being in touch with everything that is refreshing and healing, we can free ourselves from our daily concern for material comforts, and we will have a lot of more time and energy to realize our ideal of bringing freedom and compassion to all living beings. As it says in the Gospel, do not worry about what you will eat or drink or wear. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be given to you. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. In our work to end modern slavery, we must find the time to take care of ourselves and to take care of the present moment. By doing so, we can find some relative peace in our body and mind, and to continue our work. We need to recognize and embrace our own suffering, our anger, fear, and despair, so that the energy of compassion can be maintained in our heart. When we have more clarity in our mind, we will have compassion not only for the victims, but for the trafficker themselves. When we see that the trafficker have suffered, we can help them to wake up and stop what they are doing. Our compassion can help transform them into friends and allies for our cause. In order to sustain our work of compassion, we all need a spiritual community to support us and protect us. A real community where there is true brotherhood and sisterhood, compassion and understanding. We should not do this work as cavaliers seuls, as alone warriors. The root of modern slavery runs deep, and the cause and condition, the networks and structures supporting it are complex. That is why we need to build a community that can continue this work to protect human life, not just until 2020, but long into the future. The world in which we live is globalized, and so too is a new form of slavery that is connected to the economic, political, and social system. Therefore, our ethics and morality also need to be globalized. A new global order called for a new global ethics. We have to sit down together as people of many traditions, as we are doing now, to find the causes of this suffering. If we look deeply together with clarity, calm, and peace, we will understand the causes of modern slavery, and we can find a way out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now, Rabbi Skorka, the Global Freedom Network is honored that you decided to join the other religious leaders gathered here today to express your support for the vision to end slavery by 2020. Please do now share your vision with us.
Rabino Skorka, la Global Freedom Network se siente honorada.
Rabbi Skorka, the Global Freedom Network is honored by your decision to join the other religious leaders who have gathered here together to express their support to the vision of eliminating slavery by 2020. Thank you for sharing your statement with us.
Su Excelencia Reverendísima, Papa Francisco,
Your Holiness Pope Francis,
distinguidos
Excellencies,
miembros
distinguished
de este evento tan caro y
participants in
significativo.
this extremely significant and meaningful event. The
Esencia y base
Pentateuch,
de la Biblia hebrea,
the core and
posee
the
ciertos
central
ejes
concept
centrales
underlying the
en
Jewish
derredor de los
Bible,
cuales
has some
son
key
desarrollados
principles
todos
around
los
which
elementos que
all
aparecen
its
en el mismo.
elements revolve.
Asimismo, conforman el sentido
These
último del clamor de los
principles
profetas
give
y son
the outcry of
inspiración
the
de todo
prophets
aquello
its
que
definitive
aparece en los
meaning
hagiógrafos
and
postrer literatura
underlie
rabínica.
all of the contents appearing in the
El primero de dichos
hagiographies
ejes
and all subsequent
es la
rabbinic literature.
descripción de la
The first of these
creación
principles is
ex
the
nihilo
description
del
of
cosmos
the creation
por un
of the
ser
universe ex
absolutamente
nihilo
metafísico,
by a purely
espiritual y
metaphysical,
trascendente.
spiritual, and transcendent
El
being.
segundo es la creación de un
The
ser
second of these
humano
principles is the
a
creation
diferencia
of a
de
human
todas las
being
demás criaturas,
who, unlike all other
posee en su
creatures,
constitución un
has
hálito de Dios,
God's breath in his
reflejándose en él una
constitution
imagen
and was
y
made in
semejanza
his
de su
image
creador
and likeness.
que le confiere la capacidad de
And this
dialogar
confers to
aún
man the ability
con él mismo.
to speak even with God.
La misión del hombre
The mission
es
of
cuidar
man
y trabajar la
is
gran
to
obra
work
de la
and
creación.
safeguard the great
Así
work of
aparece en
creation,
Génesis
as we
2:15.
read in Genesis
Es a partir
2:15.
de este hombre
And it is from
primigenio
this primordial
que la
man
humanidad es
that
engendrada.
all mankind
De
was
este cuadro
generated.
del Génesis
Now, based on this
resulta
image of the
que todos los
Genesis,
seres humanos
we may
somos
conclude
hermanos.
that all men and women
Como
are
dijo el
brothers and
profeta,
sisters. As the prophet
no
said,
tenemos todos
have we not
un
all
mismo Padre,
one Father?
no nos ha creado
Has
un
not
único
one
Dios.
God created
Palabras
us
del
all?
profeta Malaquías 2:10.
Prophet Malachi.
El segundo elemento
2:10.
básico
The
del
second
Pentateuco
core element in
es
the
el pacto
Pentateuch,
que Dios
is God's
constituye con
covenant
Abraham y su
with Abraham
descendencia,
and his descendants,
que conlleva la revelación de Dios
leading
en
to
el monte
God's
Sinai,
revelation on Mount
un
Sinai,
momento único y esencial
which was a unique
en
and
la historia de la
fundamental event
humanidad.
in the history of mankind.
El pueblo de Israel alcanza el mismo a través de
The
una
people of Israel
experiencia de
came to
esclavitud
Mount Sinai
y
through an experience of
liberación,
enslavement and
que cada
liberation,
uno de sus miembros
which
tiene prescrito recordar
each
todos
member
los
of the
días de
Jewish
su vida.
people
La gesta de la salida de la
recalls
esclavitud de Egipto
every day of
es
their
uno de
lives.
los relatos
The
centrales del
heroic exodus
Pentateuco
from the slavery of
y uno
Egypt
de
is one
sus
of the essential
mensajes
parts of the
básicos
Pentateuch, and one of its
es el
central
valor y el
messages
sentido
is the
profundo
courage
de ser
and
una
profound
persona libre.
meaning inherent in
De lo
being a free
antedicho
person.
resulta claro
It is
que de
clear
acuerdo a
from the
la
above that
concepción bíblica,
in the
el
biblical
esclavizar a un
conception,
individuo,
enslaving
al
an
esclavizar a un
individual
individuo, se provoca un detrimento de la imagen de Dios
harms the
en el
image
seno de lo
of God,
humano.
undermines the image
Y
of
que
God
solo
lying inside every
individuos que
human
saben
being.
ser
Only those
profundamente
individuals who
pueden
can be
dignificar la
fully and
condición
profoundly
humana
free
para
can
sí mismos
dignify the
y
human
ante los
condition
ojos de
for
Dios.
themselves and in God's eyes.
Más allá de la peculiar visión de los múltiples
Aside
credos
from
o
the
cosmovisiones
view
que
that each
conforman la fe
particular
de
creed
todos
may
y
have,
cada uno de los que compartimos la existencia
which
humana
altogether
sobre la faz de la
represent the
tierra,
faith that we all share
entiendo que solo
in the
una
course of our
visión
human
del
experience on
otro
earth,
como un
there is
semejante,
only one possible way we
con
can view
igualdad de
one
derechos y
another, as
obligaciones,
equals, having the
tal
same
como
rights
propone
and
esencialmente la
obligations to
Biblia,
each other.
permitirá
This is
la
what the Bible
construcción de una
essentially
realidad
says,
más justa,
and this is what will help us
equilibrada y
create a
cuerda
reality that is more
de la que
just, more
presenciamos en el
balanced,
presente.
and more sane
Somos
than
testigos en
the
nuestros
one
días
we are
de
witnessing
la
today.
degradación que sufren
We
muchos
see in
de
our
nuestros
days many of our
congéneres,
fellow
de
men
crímenes
and
y
women being
abusos
subjected to
cometidos por
degradation.
algunos
We witness the
que
many crimes and
sojuzgan a sus
abuses committed by
prójimos,
those who break and
esclavizándolos en
enslave
múltiples
their
formas.
brothers and sisters in
Por lo
many
cual,
different ways.
me sumo a todos ustedes,
This is why I
desde mi
join you
condición
here
de
today
judío,
as a
elevando
Jew
mi clamor con
and
todas mis
raise
fuerzas,
my voice
a fin que
against this
todo
with all my
tipo de
strength
esclavización
and ask that all
sea
forms of slavery be
condenada en los
condemned
términos y con las penas
in
más
the
severas.
harshest terms and with the
En un
harshest penalties.
adendum al presente,
I'm
desarrollo en
attaching
términos
an
del derecho
appendix to the
hebreo y lo
statement
internacional
in which I further
la
developed this
petición
petition
que
based
toda
on
clase de
international and
esclavitud,
Jewish law for
ya
all
sea la
forms of slavery
explotación de la
to be
capacidad laboral,
considered crimes against
prostitución,
humanity, whether it be forced
venta de
labor,
órganos,
prostitution,
todo
organ
tipo de
trafficking,
acción que
or any other
conlleve a la
kind of
reducción a
servitude
la servidumbre del prójimo,
inflicted upon
sea
others,
considerado como un crimen de lesa
regardless
humanidad,
of any other crimes committed in addition to slavery, and the number of victims involved may be considered to be a crime.
Elevo al Altísimo mi pedido de
I ask
bendición
the Most High to
para
bless
todos aquellos que han
all those who
gestado y
have
organizado esta
conceived and
iniciativa,
organized this
pues me
initiative,
permite realizar un acto
as they are giving me the
significativo
opportunity
para honrar la memoria
to do a
de
very
mis
significant
ancestros directos.
deed to honor the memory
Junto
of my
a los
direct ancestors,
6 millones de judíos
the
y de
6
todos
million
aquellos
Jews,
que fueron
and all
esclavizados
those who
y
were enslaved
masacrados
and massacred
por los que, erigiéndose
by
en horrorosas
others
deidades,
who, posing as
esclavizaron y
hideous
masacraron a sus semejantes
deities, enslaved and
sobre los
massacred their fellow
ignominiosos altares
men and
de una
women
enfermiza
on the shameful
soberbia
altars
aún no
of their
desterrada
sickened
del género
pride, something
seno
which has
de la
yet to be
humana.
fully removed from the
Del mismo
human
modo,
heart.
honro la
I
memoria de
likewise
todos
honor
mis
the
compatriotas
memory of all
que
my
bregaron
fellow
por la libertad de la
Argentinians
Argentina,
who have
junto a la de
striven for
aquellos
freedom in
entre todos los
Argentina,
pueblos y
and the
naciones
memory of all
que
peoples
encendieron
and
la antorcha
nations
de la libertad
who have
y dieron sus vidas
raised
por
the torch
mantener su
of
llama
liberty
incólume,
and given
a
their
cuya luz
lives for its flame
es
to
alumbrado
continue to
este
burn,
encuentro.
the light that shines forth upon all those gathered here today.
Thank you, Rabbi. And now, Excellency, you are here today to represent Grand Imam Al-Azhar, who was one of the signatories of the Memorandum of Agreement and Joint Statement establishing the Global Freedom Network. The Grand Imam has expressed deep concerns about modern slavery in the past. Dr. Abdullah Abbas Shoman, we're privileged now to hear your message, the one that you bring from the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي خلق الناس من ذكر
In the name of
وأنثى
God, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise is due to God who created the people, males and females, made them into nations and tribes, and set the balance to judge who is most righteous by virtue of piety, regardless of color, ethnicity, or social status.
قال تعالى يا أيها الناس
God,
إنا
the
خلقناكم من
Almighty,
ذكر
says,
وأنثى
O mankind,
وجعلناكم
we've created
شعوبا
you from a male and a
وقبائل
female, and
لتعارفوا
made you into nations
إن
and tribes,
أكرمكم
that
عند
you may
الله
know one
أتقاكم
another.
إن
And
الله عليم خبير
the most noble amongst you is the one who is God-fearing, and God has full knowledge and is well acquainted with all things. I send peace and blessings upon the best of God's creation. Peace and blessing be upon Muhammad, who said an Arab has no superiority over anyone except by piety. Verily, the most honoured of you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous. Our trustworthy prophet was saying about Salman al-Farsi, who lived the darkness of slavery, said Salman is one of the prophet of the house, and introduced him many times before notables of Qurayshi, the tribe that the prophet belongs to. And in the teachings contained in God's book and in the prophetic tradition. This was the teaching that was then put into practice by the Prophet's companions. And to the then governor of Egypt was said when his son struck the son of a Copt of Egypt. This was denounced, and Amr ibn al-Has and his son were immediately called, and the words of our master Umar ibn al-Khattab to Amr ibn al-As, God bless him, dissatisfied with the son of al-As, were since he had beaten a man from the Copts, allowing the Copt man to punish the son, since when have you enslaved the people? You beat this man, and he looked upon Ibn al-As and said, since when have you enslaved the people when their mothers have borne them free? And this rings a familiar bell with all people. And this is a sign of the tolerance and justice of Islam. Islam teaches equality among all, irrespective of religion, irrespective of ethnic identity. Slavery was one of the major problems that plagued pre-Islamic Arabia. Slavery was so pervasive that a person could lose his freedom and be enslaved by his creditor simply by failing to settle his debt. Turning from the light of freedom to the darkness of slavery. At no point did Islam condone slavery between the people, whom it deems as being equal from the same father, Adam, and the same mother, Eve. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, all people are from Adam, and Adam was created from dust by God. Let the people cease to boast about their ancestors, or they will be of less account with God than the beetle. In spite of Islam's position, it was not possible to abolish the institution of slavery altogether. The reason for this was because it constituted a source of wealth, and as we know, money is dear to the soul, and it's very hard for people to prepare to relinquish the source of wealth. Islam, therefore, took a gradual approach to remedy this problem. It exhorted slave owners to treat their slaves well and not burden them beyond their capacity. It then narrowed the sources of slavery and deemed that the sole method for gaining captives is during warfare, and in a war between Muslims and non-Muslims, and not all prisoners could be taken as slaves. It was an option among many, and certainly not the one that was considered the most preferable. And at the same time, Islam made the emancipation of slaves as expiation for involuntary killing or for breaking the fast in Ramadan and in other cases.
من أعظم القربات التطوعية إلى الله عز وجل
Islam
لمن أراد أن
also
يتقرب إليه.
considered the emancipation of slaves as one of the greatest acts of worship
وبهذه
which please
السياسة
God.
الحكيمة المتمثلة
Through this wise
في
policy
تقليل
pursued
الموارد
by Islam to limit
وتوسيع
the sources
مخارج
of
الخلاص من
slavery and
العبودية
expand the means of
انتهى الرق
emancipation,
تماما
the
بعد
practice
فترة
of slavery
زمنية ليست
came to an
بالطويلة
end only a short while after the
وليس
advent
صحيحا
of
على
Islam.
الإطلاق ما
And,
يدعيه البعض أن شريعة
What is
الإسلام
claimed by some
رسخت
is
لبقاء
not true,
الرق
i.e. it is not true
مستدلين على
that
ذلك
Islam paved the way for
بأمر الإسلام
sustainable
بالإحسان
slavery,
للعبيد فإن هذه نظرة بعض
as
من
it is
قصرت
instructed treating
أفهامهم عن
slaves with
فهم
kindness and
شريعة
care. This
الإسلام
is the vision of some who
فإن الإحسان
fail
إلى
to
العبيد
understand the essence of
لم
Islamic
يكن ترسيخا
law,
للعبودية ولا إقرارا
treating
لها
slaves with
وإنما
kindness
كان علاجا آنيا
was
ومرحليا
a temporary solution
حتى
to
تقتلع
what
المشكلة
was
من جذورها وهو
an
ما حدث بعد
intractable
ذلك
problem, until Islam was able later to find a radical solution to
ومع
eradicate
القضاء
slavery.
المبرم على الرق في التشريع الإسلامي والشرائع السماوية الأخرى لا زلنا نتحدث
However,
عن
despite
مكافحة
the
العبودية
ratification of the abolition of slavery by Islamic law and the laws of other
لأنها
revealed faiths
بقيت بين
today, we
الناس
continue
في
to battle
صورتها الأولى
slavery
في بعض
as
الدول
it still exists in some
وهو
countries
وجود
in its
لا يقره
primary
تشريع
form.
سماوي فضلا عن شريعة الإسلام السمحة
This is something that
وتأباه
no religion
المواثيق
approves,
والأعراف الدولية
including tolerant Islamic law.
وهناك صور أخرى
And we
حديثة
know that
من سلب الحريات التي تقترب
all forms of
كثيرا
slavery
من
are
صور
deemed reprehensible in
العبودية في
Islamic law and
زماننا
religious and human rights
منها
institutions. There are
الاتجار
unfortunately many
بالبشر
contemporary institutions of
والعمل
slavery
القسري
in our time, including human
والعمل
trafficking,
للوفاء
forced
بالديون
labor, debt bondage,
والزواج القسري
forced marriage,
واسترقاق الأطفال
child
وقهر
slavery,
المرأة وحرمانها من تقلد بعض المناصب التي تصلح لها والتمييز
oppression of women and
على
depriving
أساس
women from
الجنس
holding
أو العرق أو
appropriate
المعتقد
positions, or discrimination on the basis of
وتحكم
gender,
ذوي
race,
الأعمال في العمالة
or belief,
الوافدة
as well
تحكما
as
مانعا من السفر
the arbitrary
وكابحا
power
للحريات
that is
وسالبا
wielded
للإرادة
by some employers on their
وهذه
workers,
الصور
limiting
وغيرها
de facto their
صور
freedoms.
يبغضها شرعنا الحنيف
All
ولا
these
يقرها
and other forms of slavery are deemed
ويوجب على
reprehensible
المؤسسات والهيئات
in our
والمنظمات الدينية
tolerant religion
والحقوقية التصدي لها
institutions, international
ودفع
organizations
الدول
must
دفعا
all work
لسن
to
القوانين والتشريعات الرادعة عن سلب الحريات
push
أيا
countries
كان
to
نوعها
enact laws and legislations
وهو ما يعمل الأزهر الشريف
that
مع غيره من
may
المؤسسات المعنية
deter the deprivation
لتحقيقه
of freedoms. And to achieve this goal, Al-Azhar
هذا
is working
المنطلق
in collaboration with other concerned
أوفدني إمام
institutions.
المسلمين شيخ الأزهر
I
حفظه الله
have been sent here by
أشد على أيديكم
Grand Imam, may Allah
وأبلغه
protect him,
أبلغكم
to
أمنياته
bring his
لكم
message
بالتوفيق
and express
في
his
خدمة
best
الإنسانية
wishes to
لأن
you
الأزهر
in your
الشريف
efforts
يعمل
as
لخدمة
Al-Azhar
الإنسانية
Al-Sharif is
جمعاء
working with
فهذه
you
هي
to serve
رسالته
all
وفقكم
humanity.
الله
And this
شكرا
is
لكم
his message. May God help you, and I wish you success in your endeavors.
Thank you. And we are now going to witness messages of support that have been sent in by video. They've been provided by His All Holiness the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, as well as the Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Bashir Hussein al-Najafi.
Dear friends, it is a special privilege and a sincere pleasure to respond to the invitation of our beloved brothers, His Holiness Pope Francis, and His Grace Archbishop Justin of Canterbury as co-founders of the Global Freedom Network to address your assembly and to support your universal declaration against modern slavery. We would like to assure you that we stand with you in solidarity and commitment to eradicate modern expressions of slavery, which are a disgrace to God, a dishonor to humankind, and the degradation of all its innocent victims, fashioned in the image and likeness of our heavenly Creator. There are three observations that we would like to bring to your attention about the moral imperative to abolish human trafficking and forced labor. First, how ironic and moreover how tragic that in the 21st century we are still responding to the moral challenge of slavery. Indeed, the slavery that we witness and confront is more inhumane and more malevolent than similar phenomena in the early Christian centuries or even in more recent centuries. For today we are addressing and responding to an invisible, clandestine and underground reality, one that shamelessly exploits and mercilessly undermines both men and women of all ages, race, and religion through such criminal and abusive measures as human trafficking, forced labor, prostitution, and organ trafficking. Second, how ironic and moreover how tragic that once again the most profoundly and negatively affected are the vulnerable and poor of our world. It is foolish and arrogant for people with power and wealth to imagine that they can seize possession or acquire ownership of other people's labor for purposes of greed and profit. It is sinful and immoral for people to capitalize on and exploit the body or physical organs of others as if these were somehow distinct or disconnected from their soul and spirit. And it is certainly blasphemous and hubris to reduce any one of our brothers and sisters, irrespective of gender, race, and age, to a single aspect of the mystery and destiny for which they were created by the living God. The body and productivity of others are not ours to own. They are only ours to respect and treat with dignity. And third, how ironic and moreover how tragic that while we strive to establish thresholds and deadlines to protect the natural environment as God's gift to the world, we nevertheless remain unaware and indifferent to the oppressive abuse of human beings bearing the very seal of divine grace. We have not yet understood that ecological pollution and destruction on the one hand, and human slavery and exploitation on the other hand, are two sides of the same coin. It is our human and divine vocation to remember and recognize that the way that we treat our neighbor is directly related to the way that we care for our environment. And by the same token, the way that we respond to our environment is immediately reflected in the way that we behave toward other human beings. Dear brothers and sisters, let us always hold before our eyes and our hearts that the earth is the Lord's and all that is within it, του Κυρίου η γη και το πλήρωμα αυτής, including every human being, as well as every bodily organ. God alone is the Lord of all humanity and the landlord of all creation. To him belong all glory, honor, and worship. Amen.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أبعث من النجف الأشرف أرض القداسة والطهارة والعلم التحية لهذا الجمع
gathering seeking to serve humanity, and I hope that this effort will be crowned with success. And to all I say, praise be to Allah, and peace and blessings on the best of creation, Muhammad and his blessed family, and a permanent curse be upon all their enemies. God Almighty said, O mankind, indeed, we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. God Almighty has spoken the truth. Human beings, in accordance with the nature and purpose of procreation, are equal. No one has honor over the other except by piety. As the Taqwa teaches, that God made it the way of comparison among them. And it remains with fairness and equitability, and abandoning this is contrary to piety. However, humans went too far and exceeded the justice system. Some of them went off to enslave and exploit others for their own psychological purposes. Therefore, slavery spread, and that became part of the social entity. Civilizations and royalty were formed, and the slavery system became part of the public system and an essential component of the economic and service system. It was difficult to eliminate it at once, and Islam, the religion of humanity, chose to narrow the circle with a system that ensured the spread of freedom and a sense of dignity for all. Today it is unfortunate that the enslavement of human beings has become a moral burden, because it includes strong preying on the weak and the rich on the poor. And this work became out of justice and fairness. Contemporary slavery is unjust and unfair. It is a corrupted social phenomenon and a means to spread terror among the people. And what follows of it is prostitution and trafficking in human organs, which are illegal and must be eliminated. Some of the existing systems are responsible for these social evils because of the failure to safeguard the rights of all people and distancing itself from the correct instructions under God's justice. Those who could strive to remove this corrupt phenomenon have to spare no effort in doing this. Peace be upon you.
So we thank those two distinguished faith leaders for joining us by video. And just before I carry on, because of the lack of translation equipment, apparently there are the speeches in your bags. So if you'd like to reach into your bags, those of you who don't already have them out, go right ahead. Because next, we're going to introduce Grand Ayatollah Mohammad Taghi al-Modarresi. It is an honor for this group to welcome you into this hall today. And please share with us your appeal on the eradication of modern slavery.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, man was created, a male and a female, and the peoples were created.
السلام على إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق.
Peace on Abraham, peace on Ishmael, peace on Jacob, peace
السلام على عيسى
on the prophets,
وموسى ومحمد عليهم أفضل الصلاة والسلام.
peace on Muhammad, peace on all the prophets.
زعماء الأديان والمذاهب.
Ladies and gentlemen, leaders of the faiths of the world, we bring you greetings, greetings of freedom, greetings of love and fondness, greetings from God who loves His entire creation. The Lord, blessed be He, created human beings and placed in their souls the faculty of reason and gave to each human being the right to seek their life and happiness and fulfillment. In every human soul, there's the seed of God's mercy, and God, the all-powerful, the generous, is present in every human being's conscience. Every human being seeks dignity and freedom. God is sublime, and every human being seeks to raise himself or herself to God. And therefore, in the conscience of every human being, we see the reflections of God's words, God's names, and God's nature. Dignity was given to human beings by God, one of His greatest attributes. And there can be no dignity without freedom. All of the goods stem from freedom. And God entrusted His words and His names to us through the pious men, His messengers, His saints who call other men on the path to the Lord, reminding them of the words and God's names that they keep in their conscience. We were honored by God with this great message. We could perhaps see greater opportunities in our times to appeal to human beings to return to their conscience and to strive in all ways to preserve their dignity and to eradicate from human reality today the roots of evil and the sources of corruption. We must remind all human beings of our calling to love one another for the good of humanity. The relationship of God with His creation is one. No human being is closer to the Lord, and the way to the Lord is through good deeds and the conscience and fearing God. Every human being is a creature of God, and therefore, as is the environment, and therefore corrupting the environment or distances man from God. There's a failure to understand religion due to ignorance, which has divided human beings. And the faithful and those who believe in God often experience walls between them, even between people of the same faith. But the only religion is God's religion, and He makes no distinctions between faiths and creeds or faith communities. The barriers have served to weaken the influence of religion on humankind. Today, we are called upon to make greater efforts to overcome these barriers. And all together, work in God's religion for the good of humanity, for every human being, at all times and all places. And we, faith leaders of the different faiths and creeds of the world, must work together that the meaning of God and His names be better understood by human beings, and that human beings respond to their calling to live a better life, a life of peace. The path to integration and cooperation is before us, and we must work together, united, to free human beings from injustice and slavery in all its forms and all its manifestations. Just as we stand against disease and warfare and the spread of weapons of mass destruction, in the same way, we see the huge gap between the countries of the north and the south of the world. We see the destruction of the environment before our eyes. We know that religion can lead us to God, and therefore the religious leaders and the faithful behind them now must rise up to their duty. And we trust that God's hand will be behind them, and that with this, these noble and lofty objectives may be reached, thereby securing a better life for all members of humankind. Those who stand by God will be supported by God. And to conclude, therefore, a few words to call us all to work together to save humanity from violence and discrimination. May our appeal be addressed to God and not to our own particular religion or ethnic group. I invite us all to work for an integration of our civilizations based on love. Some spoke of the clash of civilizations, others have spoken of dialogue among civilizations. I call for an integration of civilizations, with one completing the other. And I invite the faith leaders to undertake bold initiatives to help free humanity from poverty and disease, from the arms race, destruction of the environment, and all forms of slavery. I call for the formation of an initiative that could take the shape of an organization such as UNESCO or other international organizations, an international organization having as its main objective that of eradicating slavery in all its forms and repressing those who exploit human slavery. I call upon God to give this assembly His blessing, and I join my voice to those who have called for this. May this be a step towards a better life for humankind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Archbishop Justin Welby, in March this year, you agreed to the signing of the Memorandum of Agreement and the joint statement that established the Global Freedom Network. You called for the world to wake up to modern-day slavery, and we're privileged now to hear your appeal to eradicate modern slavery and human trafficking.
At a time when faiths are seen wrongly as a cause of conflict, it is a sign of real hope that today global faith leaders have together committed themselves publicly to the battle to end modern slavery. We live in a world where over 30 million people are oppressed in some form of slavery: trafficking, forced labor and prostitution, the trade in human organs, and many more outrages. The suffering is unimaginable. The challenge is acute and growing, facilitated by a globalized economy that is too easily without moral or conscience. We gather to affirm a deep shared commitment for the liberation of those humiliated, abused, and enslaved by their fellow human beings. It is a challenge which must be undertaken in global partnership with others. For Christians, commitment grows out of two fundamental convictions. First, God has made humanity in the divine image. No one should be enslaved or denied the dignity of sharing actively and freely in the common life in which liberty is a part of creation. The second conviction goes even further. Christians believe that the divine life was lived fully and uniquely in the flesh and blood of a human being, Jesus Christ, born through the willing cooperation of his mother Mary. And so we are bound to see every human being as part of the divine plan. This means that no human body can in any circumstances be simply an object to be traded, trafficked, or enslaved. In Christ, we find our liberation restored. God treated humanity with such loving respect by choosing to take human form among us, so we must share that love and respect for all human beings. The evils we seek to combat will not yield without struggle. The complex global environment is why we need the strongest possible collaboration between national governments everywhere, with the business sector, police forces, civil society, faith communities, and all those who long to see all humanity live in freedom. There are already close and trusting relationships between us as faith leaders. Our task now is to make those relationships work effectively for the well-being of all people. The Anglican Communion has given a high priority to this task, and I want to affirm my own personal commitment to it. But what can we do? We can make sure that every worshipping community of every faith knows about modern slavery and is ready to work to prevent and put an end to these abuses. We can look to our own actions and choices as consumers and users of financial services whose managers can put great pressure on companies in which they invest. We can make sure that those who have been enslaved and trafficked are supported, respected, and welcomed into community. We can continue to press governments to implement more effective laws to root out these evils. In the United Kingdom, the Modern Slavery Bill is currently going through Parliament and is a very good model. We can work with the business sector across the globe to ensure robust systems for slave-free supply chains. And we can reinforce the ties of friendship and trust among ourselves and with all those who profess faith and those who do not, who share our commitment to end slavery. Today's event of the Global Freedom Network is a profoundly significant moment. We have joined together for the liberation of the most vulnerable in our world. We owe particular thanks to Bishop Sanchez Sorondo, to Archbishop Sir David Moxon, and above all, Andrew Forrest, directors of the Global Freedom Network. And as we make this solemn commitment today, My prayer is that we shall, by God's grace, play a key role in ending the inhuman practice of modern slavery, a practice that disfigures our world and obscures the image of God in men, women, and children. We have the will, we have the common purpose. It can be done. May God bless our action together.
Archbishop, thank you very much. And before we proceed to the core action of the event, which is, of course, signing the joint declaration by all the religious leaders, I would, in fact, like to introduce Andrew Forrest, as was just called out, who is one of the executive board directors of the Global Freedom Network.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing history here today. These brave leaders from all faiths, can we give them collectively a very big hand? You have created history where there's never been such a journey trodden like yours before. Today we'll have the first meeting with the senior Grand Ayatollah from Iran and Iraq, with the Holy Father, the Pope. We have almost unprecedented collaboration between Sunni and Shia, Christianity and Islam, in a worldwide course to end slavery. I applaud in particular the Sunni and Shia who have showed to me their love and support for each other. This was so essential in making this miraculous day happen. I salute the representatives of Christianity and Islam, be you Sunni or Shia, Orthodox, Anglican or Catholic or any of the other faiths under God, sons and daughters of Abraham. My heart, I must admit, drifts in an ocean of gratitude that also my Hindu, my Buddhist, Hebrew, Muslim, and Christian brothers and sisters have made this historical journey of forgiveness and love, and for each other, in the faith leaders, in obedience of their texts and their prophets of all time. This is an unprecedented demonstration of faith leaders of the world coming together to draw a line in the sand to end the scourge of slavery, to draw the line in the sand to start the world on its journey to utilise the new and modern instruments upon which a world without slavery may shortly stand. I deeply thank all the faith leaders gathered here today who joined with their fellow global faith leaders not able to be with us in this beautiful Vatican room, to rally the collective billions of believers in our world to join together in a common love of humanity as so ably represented and championed by Pope Francis, to end the suffering of the poorest and most unrepresented in our world, those who suffer the slavery of forced labour, sexual exploitation, and any form of unconscionable removal of freedom in our world. In this day, in this glorious day, where we all celebrate the unprecedented demonstration of global love and peace for and between faith leaders of the world. We ask each of you who have spoken here today in this room or witnessing this around the world to share their common conviction that systematic removal of liberty to exploit another must no longer be in this world. As we collaboratively draw together to end this crime against humanity. Most powerfully, we all know, gathered here today, it is the beliefs and values which resides in the hearts of all mankind that drives the evil of good so that drives the evil or that drives the good of man. Yet it is not until now that we have this great initiative, these institutions and these weapons to truly end slavery, as the Pope has begged and requested in the year 2020. So we are all aware, ladies and gentlemen, that it is the dimensions of power that we know well are firstly political and hard power, secondly soft power, the sum of diplomacy, propaganda, economic or commercial power, intelligence, counterintelligence, and the like, which is pointed out by David Young, guides the hard power. But it is the third dimension of power which drives both of those powers on earth. It is not tangible, not hard nor soft. It is neither intellectual nor plans or strategizes. It leads to and is often victorious over the wars of the spirit between good and evil, both unseen and supernatural. It is this power, the power to change the hearts of humankind, to set right the values and beliefs that will always free those in bondage. In the words of my daughter Grace, who led me into this journey with all of you to end slavery, where she described with childlike clarity, in describing the evil of exploitation of one human being over another and in the form of its modern slavery, in all its ugly dimensions, forced labour, exploitation. It is Grace who described to me that slavery is not a human condition. It is a human choice. This third spiritual power, which embodies the beliefs and values of man, and it's that guiding power in these faith leaders gathered here today that I strongly on your behalf welcome. These brave leaders, we ask you to challenge your believers, your congregations everywhere. You can reach up to 90% of the world's entire population. I ask you to appeal to each one, be they humble or proud, least or great, girl or boy, woman or man, to recognise modern slavery and to call it for the evil that it is. For we know that good and evil do not occur on its own. It occurs from within our heart of mankind. It is not some supernatural or ominous force external to any of us, but rather it is evil which can be managed and minimised from within our own hearts. I must admit that I am reminded here by the words of the Prophet Muhammad, may he be forever blessed, who shares the message of love spoken so many times by Jesus and led by God and shown here today in the peaceful and loving Hindu, Hebrew and Buddhist faith leaders, that love the least is the greatest mercy, and for any of us to free a slave, perhaps the greatest forgiveness of sin. It is you, Pope Francis, like the faith leaders gathered here today, that I salute for globally championing the cause to end trafficking and slavery, for always bravely stepping out to elevate the least represented, girl or boy, woman or man, and rallying all of us to end the dreadful scourge of their lack of rights in the modern world, to correct their lack of dignity, their lack of human rights, as described in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I deeply thank you all, my brothers and sisters. I deeply thank Sheikh Omar Aboud of the Muslim Sunni faith, Sheikh Nazir Razak Jafar of the Shia, representing the Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Bashir Hussain al-Najafi of the Shia faith, the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid al-Madarisi, who left Tehran in Iran only yesterday to be with us in person today, Dr. Abdullah Abbas Shaman, representing the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, the Muslim Sunni faith, Her Holiness Amatrana Hundu Mai of the Hindu faith, the Venerable Bhikkhu Thich Nhat Chan Kong, representing the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist faith, Rabbi Dr. Abraham Skorka, and my respected mentor, Dr. Rabbi Rosen of the Jewish faith, the Most Venerable Dhammaratana, Chief High Priest of Malaysia of the Buddhist faith, and of course His Eminence, Metropolitan Emmanuel of France, representing His Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew of the Orthodox faith, and of course my inspiration and guide in this great journey, the leader of the Anglican faith, the Right and Most Honourable Justin Welby, Archbishop of Canterbury. His selfless, humble dedication to the cause of peace in the world has inspired us all, like has Pope Francis and the faith leaders here. And it is impossible for me to go past this moment without also showing my enormous gratitude to His Excellency Cardinal Peter Turkson. It is you, Cardinal Turkson, who less than 2 years ago encouraged me with my daughter Grace on this rare journey from right here in the Vatican. I acknowledge the tremendous work around the clock and around the world, the very sleepless nights, one ending and leading to another, of the Global Freedom Network executives and those of the Walk Free teams everywhere. Those sleepless nights and your absolute dedication, of those most dedicated to the cause, for your love and support, we rest on your wings. I acknowledge and am carried by His Excellency Bishop Sanchez Sorondo with that mentorship shared of humility, of determination and guiding wisdom, which we, Bishop Sanchez Sorondo, Archbishop Sir David Moxham, you gave to me. I thank you both. I thank the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, the Buddhist, the Hindu, the Christian, the Hebrew and the Islamic faiths that have drawn us together and created history today on behalf of us all, and particularly the modern enslaved. I salute you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Forrest. Muchas gracias, señor Forrest. Hoy nos acompañan dos supervivientes, defensores de la causa, que también serán testigos del
who are witnesses of the commitment that has been undertaken here in this hall by the leaders of the great religions. We have Claudia with us from Mexico. She survived human trafficking and she was forced into prostitution. Today, her life's work is to bring her message to the young people of the world to help them avoid falling into the networks of human trafficking.
Who are what we're all talking about. James was a child slave in the fishing industry on Ghana's Lake Volta. He escaped, he got an education, a successful career, and then he set up the organization Challenging Heights, which rescues children from Lake Volta and provides them with care, education, and hope. And we'll now proceed to accomplish what we've gathered here today to do. The honorable group here will sign the joint declaration to underline their common commitment to inspiring spiritual and practical action by all global religions and people of goodwill everywhere to eradicate modern slavery. Right now, I invite James to read the joint declaration as the signing is going on.
Joint Declaration of Religious Leaders Against Modern Slavery. We, the undersigned, are gathered here today for a historical initiative to inspire spiritual and practical action by all global faiths and people of goodwill everywhere to eradicate modern slavery across the world by 2020 and for all times. In the eyes of God, each human being is a free person, whether girl, boy, woman, or man, and is destined to exist for the good of all in equality and fraternity. Modern slavery in terms of human trafficking, forced labor, and prostitution organ trafficking, and any relationship that fails to respect the fundamental conviction that all people are equal and have same freedom and dignity is a crime against humanity. We pledge ourselves here today to do all in our power within our faith communities and beyond to work together for the freedom of all those who are enslaved and trafficked so that their future may be restored. Today we have the opportunity, awareness, wisdom, innovation, and technology to achieve this human and moral imperative.
Y ahora invito Claudia a leer.
And I would like to invite Claudio to read out the same declaration in Spanish.
Los aquí firmantes estamos reunidos hoy aquí en pro de iniciativa histórica que tiene por objetivo inspirar a todos los credos y a las personas de buena voluntad de todo el mundo a llevar adelante acciones tanto espirituales como prácticas con el fin de llegar al año 2020 habiendo erradicado las formas modernas de esclavitud de una vez y para siempre y en todo el planeta. A los ojos de Dios, cada ser humano, sea niña, niño, mujer u hombre, es una persona libre y está destinado a existir para el bien de todos, en igualdad y fraternidad. Las formas modernas de esclavitud, tales como la trata de personas, el trabajo forzado, la prostitución, el tráfico de órganos y toda la relación que respete la convicción fundamental que todas las personas son iguales y tienen la misma libertad y la misma dignidad, constituye un delito grave de lesa humanidad. Nos comprometemos a hacer todo lo que esté a nuestro alcance dentro de nuestras comunidades de fe y más allá de ellas, para trabajar juntos en pro de la libertad de todos los que son víctimas de esclavitud y trata de personas. Y en aras de la recuperación del futuro, hoy contamos con la posibilidad de poner nuestras conciencias, nuestra sabiduría, nuestra innovación y nuestra tecnología al servicio de la concreción de este imperativo humano y moral.
Ahora se firmará la declaración.
Now the declaration will be signed. The group that has gathered here today will sign this joint declaration that states that modern slavery, trafficking of human beings, forced labor, prostitution, trafficking in human organs is a crime against humanity. This signing means the shared commitment with the spiritual and practical actions of all of the religions and all human beings of goodwill in the world to eradicate modern slavery.
Your Holiness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of this ceremony. I would like to thank the honorable group gathered here. I'd also like to thank the audience for attending this historic event. As shown so clearly and impressively by the religious leaders present, together we can make a difference to eradicate modern slavery, which is, of course, an issue that requires urgent attention in every country and all religious communities on our planet. Thank you.
Quisiera simplemente dar las
Simply
gracias
like
al
to
honorable
thank
grupo
the
aquí
honourable group
presente.
present here.
All right.
I think we have done
I
our
think we
job.
did our job.
So it was good that we have found the confusion. But
no,
maybe
brilliant.
they have sent you
They
tanto
didn't. I
days
think they
ago
just forgot.
somewhere. Yes, yes.
This was the latest one they sent me, but I think
No. Well,
it's all right.
No.
Lucky you had the right script.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ciao.
Good doing business with you. Thank you. Ciao. Thank you. Thank you. Look, they were all here, the speeches, yeah.